welcome back to the Samantha Marie podcast. I'm so happy you're here. This show is all about mental, spiritual, and physical wellness because I am on a mission to help you create a life that you truly love. And today, guys, I have a treat for you. I have my friend Denise with us today. And this episode is just full of wisdom, of encouragement. And I really believe it's so important that we learn from the generations that came before us. And that is what this episode is all about. Denise opens up about her upbringing and growing up in the 60s and the 70s with the women's movement, and she opens up about divorce and what she learned through that and how God brought together her current marriage. I mean, such a divine, amazing story of how God brought together her current marriage and what she's learned about marriage and just advice that she has for us. And this episode's so encouraging. So make sure to stay till the end of the episode so you can just soak up everything that she shares with us today. And before we jump into it, I just want to remind you to, if you don't already, make sure to follow me on TikTok and Instagram at Hey, It's Samantha Marie. And if you haven't already, if you could rate the show and write a review on Apple and Spotify, that would mean so much to me. That is how we grow. That's how we reach more people. And we're also on YouTube. You can watch every episode there. And lastly, if this episode encourages you, please make sure to share with a friend. All right, guys, let's jump into it. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Samantha Marie podcast. I am so happy to be with you here today, and we have a really special guest, Denise. I don't even know how to say your last name now that I'm thinking about it. Is it Cote?
No, it's Cote. My husband's family dropped the other pronunciations, that they might use in Maine. It's Cote.
Cote. Okay, yes. It's spelled C-O-T-E. So yes, I was like, wait, what is it? But guys, I'm so excited to have Denise on today because it's kind of a long story how we know each other, but I had a mutual friend connect me with a community in Connecticut, and I actually went and stayed with a family in Connecticut last summer for about a month, and it really changed my life. It was just incredible, and I met the most incredible people there, and Denise is one of those people that I met, and you probably don't even realize it, but just from talking with you and interacting with you, it has really helped me be more confident in who I am as a person and as even a follower of Jesus, and really just being okay with being imperfect in my past and boldly being a confident and strong woman. And so anyway, I wanted everyone to hear from you your story that you've shared with me, and there's probably so much that I don't even know yet too. So I'm excited to just have a deeper conversation with you today. So thanks so much for being here to talk about your journey.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
And I was telling Denise, I'm very intentional with who I have on the podcast too. I always pray before and say, God, who's the next guest? And I was praying for a few weeks about, okay, Lord, I've been doing some solo episodes. Who do you want next on the show? And I kept seeing your face. And so I'm really excited to dive in today. But so why don't we just start with your background, your upbringing, kind of maybe before you came to God and how life was back in the day. Mm-hmm. Give us the lowdown on Denise.
Okay. Well, I am the oldest of four. I have two sisters and a brother. I grew up in little small towns. My parents had moved to Connecticut from Maine, so they grew up in rural Maine. They were married quite young, and so my mom is still with us. She's 90 years old, and she's amazing. We didn't go to church when I was little, but I always knew that God was real somehow. I knew God was real. And when I was, I think maybe third grade or something, we did start going to to church. We went to a mainline Protestant church, and it's like, okay, God's there. We weren't taught about a personal relationship or anything like that. But it was a pretty uneventful childhood, I guess. At least for us, right? My mom did sew our clothes when we were little. Um, or we got hand-me-downs. I had a lot of older cousins because my mother, she's actually from a very large family. She's the 12th of 13 kids. So there were other cousins that lived in Connecticut as well. And so we did get some hand-me-down clothes from the girls. And well, my mom also made some of our clothes. And we didn't have a lot of money. My dad worked a lot of jobs when we were really little. My mom never worked all the time that I was growing up. She was in the home. But a remarkable thing about my mother is that she did everything. She, besides being an amazing baker and a cook, she sewed the slip covers for our living room furniture and the curtains for the walls. And she painted the house after when we finally did get our own home. She painted it inside and out. She did the garden work. Um, she was amazing. So I grew up really with the idea that you can do whatever you set your mind to. Um, my parents were very just like down to earth people. Um, they never talked. I never heard them speak badly about others. Um, but it was also kind of a like, all right, look, you have to do the right thing. Always do the right thing. And I kind of grew up feeling like I had to do all the right stuff in order to be accepted. Right? If you do all the right things, you bring home the A's from on your report card. You do the chores, you do whatever. Right? Make sure it looks good in front of the neighbors. you know, can't have the neighbors thinking that that you're not like this perfect child. And so that's kind of how I grew up. I mean, they're wonderful people, but we all have that stuff, right? That really baggage that we have to deal with. Um, and we only moved twice when I was growing up. Our town didn't have a high school, so I had to go to a city to go to high school, which was a big experience for me, like a huge deal, because I lived in a small town, like I said, where it was very very white, should we say.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of diversity in our
Okay.
town. And all right, so I was born in 1953. And so like the 50s, I don't know if you guys know, or if you know, or your audience knows about Donna Reed, but you could Google her. It was a television show. And so Donna Reed is who my mother looked like by the time my father came home from work. She put the supper on the
Okay.
table. She's all dressed up, the hair, the makeup, this
Wow.
dress, the whole thing, putting the dinner on the table. And
Yep.
so I kind of grew up thinking like, oh, yeah, this is like what life is supposed to be like, you know,
Hmm.
um, that this is what I'm going to grow up. When I grow up, this is what's going to be my life. I'm going to get married. I'm going to have the house with a little white picket fence and, you know, all the things, right? The 2.4 children, whatever he thinks about that, and then, it doesn't always work out that way, but that's what I was pretty normal. Um, High school was interesting because, like I said, it is by this time, it's during the late 60s. There was a lot of racial strife. Um, there was like the drug scene was coming in. It was all the whole like hippies, uh, sex, drugs, and rock and roll business everywhere. Um, so it was it was kind of a weird thing, that what I thought life was going to be, and then with the way things were, even in the country, and it was just like weird. It was just weird. So it was kind of a time of turmoil, even internally, right? With how things are supposed to be, and feeling like recognizing. Of course, you're a teenager now, right? You're recognizing there's injustice in the world that you had no idea was a thing, and then trying to deal with that, you know, against what your life was like up to that point.
Wow. Okay. So I love this background. So you were in high school in the 60s then when all of this started coming about. And so did you end up becoming part of the hippie movement? Because I know we've talked about your bra burning phase.
Yeah, that was in the
That was a
70s.
later in the
That was in the
70s.
70s. Yeah.
Okay, so in the 60s, then you started seeing, oh, there's some injustices here. And so I guess, how did that change your like outlook on life? Or was there anything you kind of started doing around that time to get more involved in things?
Mm. It's interesting because I felt very strongly that I knew the way things were supposed to be in the world, even from when I was a little kid. So I just kind of knew like the way God's way of doing stuff was supposed to be, even though I really
Mm,
didn't know God. And so I was seeing more and more like the world. This is not how it's supposed to be. I don't like injustice, and I would be vocal about that. And it was kind of was a problem, a little bit of a problem at home because with my parents, you're supposed to be a conformist.
right.
You don't rebel against whatever, all the things, and you're just a kid. What do you know? That, like, the things we always say to kids.
What were you seeing? What were you seeing exactly that caused you to think, oh, this isn't right?
Well, there were some race riots actually in the city where I went to school, and then learning about segregation, which I had never been taught. I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know it
Mm-hmm.
existed, um, and I didn't understand until I learned those things. Why do people have a problem? What is their problem? And then I learned what their problem was, and it was like, oh, this is not right. This is not how it should be. And then I also saw on the other side of that, um, because of the tensions that were going on, there was the all right, because if you look a certain way, then you're part of the problem too. When it's like I had nothing to do with this. Like, don't put this on me. Or a
Mm,
friend of mine from our town, we had there's only 3 Black families in our town, and one of them came to school, and some of the other kids like beat him up because he had white friends. And so it was like, okay, everybody's like crazy here.
mm,
Everyone's crazy. So I started, I started talking about these things and really feeling them very, of course I had no power to do anything, but I felt very strongly about these things.
yeah.
And then there was the other side of like the hippie culture, which was like calling like a, like a siren, um, with the music. And there was like in the school, you could buy drugs, whatever people wanted to buy, they could buy drugs. Um, and so friends of mine were starting to experiment with drugs. I was terrified of my father. So it actually kept me out of trouble, a lot of trouble that I might have gotten in, because I was afraid of what would happen if I did something that I wasn't supposed to do, and I got caught. So I was pretty stayed pretty clean throughout high school. Um, but it was the allure of that whole thing, and
Mm.
the whole idea of rebelling against authority, which was that was very appealing to me. And it's kind of really that was the spirit of the age at the time, is doing all that.
And I just want to stop and reflect really quick because it's wild that segregation was literally, it was recent, the 60s. I mean,
Yes,
I
yes.
remember my mom told me that she remembers going to elementary school and it being this huge thing that they like integrated the schools. Is that the right word? They
Yes.
integrated the schools, and all the parents were like really upset about it and everything. And she was scared because all the parents were mad. But this is, it's just wild to think about that was literally just recent. And we grew up so different than that. And there's still a long way to go. But I mean, we grew up completely different. Like we always were integrated, and we have friends of all different races and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it's so interesting hearing from people that witnessed and lived through that. It's so interesting. Like it's a gift, I would say, that you knew God from a young age, even though you weren't really raised in church, and you just knew his heart. Because a lot of us, and it's group think, right? That like takes over, or like a brainwashing of an entire group of people that have this thinking. But I always think it's so amazing when someone just naturally from a young age knows the heart of God or is aligned with the heart of God. Like you were in a community of people that thought one way, but you knew God's heart. And that's such a gift, and a miracle, I would say. So I guess let's move on then to your 20s probably. Were you in the 70s in your 20s?
Yes.
So you were like one of those those 70s look so wild. So tell us about this.
the
We want to know
70s,
about this.
the 70s were definitely wild. So the thing is, okay, so when I graduated from high school, I was still 17 years old because
I was too.
yeah, I didn't turn 18 until the end of September the following year. So
Yep.
I got married like right after
Wow.
graduation.
Because that's
And
what you did back then.
yeah, well,
A lot of
yeah,
people, right?
like my family kind of, right. Yeah, we did. But I chose poorly. Okay, so by the time that really the 70s went into full swing, um, I was not married anymore. I was alone. I did have my son was born a year after we got married, so that was a good thing. But I going back to when I was in the sixth grade, what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to do? And I was like, okay, the space program was coming on, and they were doing amazing things, and I'm like, okay, I want to go in the Air Force and learn how to fly. I want to be a pilot, and then after that, I want to maybe fly commercial jets, and then I want to be an astronaut. And they're like, oh no, dear. No, girls don't get to do that. They don't let girls fly the airplanes. If you really want to be you can be a stewardess if you really want to be on airplanes. But no, they don't let girls do that. So this is not the example I saw with my mother could do like everything. But so in the 70s, of course, that was when the women's movement came about. And when you realize that you know more than some of the people that are in charge when you're a kid. My third grade teacher, we were learning longhand, right? Cursive writing. And they tell you, she was like, okay, turn the paper, like angle the paper this way. And then all the right-handed people, they can write. I'm left-handed. So I'm like, like this, trying to write. And she's like yelling at me to sit up in my chair. I'm like, okay. So I'm trying to like do this. I'm like, how am I? Oh, wait, it dawned on me. If I turn my paper the other way, then I can write. Because I didn't print a lot of left-handed people do upside down. I don't, I write normal. So she got mad at me and yelled at me for moving my paper the other way. Well, I went home and I told my mother because she made me cry. And so it dawned on me that, like, wait a minute. I figured this out, but my teacher didn't figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
So I figured that I'm like, okay, I'm smarter than this woman is, and she's my teacher. This is ridiculous. What is wrong here? So as I got older and I went out in the working world, And I'm thinking, like, I'm seeing that, okay, just because I'm a woman, it doesn't mean that I'm less capable. When I would be working for people and it's like, okay, I could figure out how to do your job. Um, and I was perfectly capable of doing those kind of things. And I could do some, physical labor, not really. It's not like I was ever, super strong, but I could hold my own. I wasn't like this fragile little thing. Um, and so the whole idea of the women's movement was that, no, everybody needs to be judged on their capabilities. And if my interests are, in high school, math and science were my favorite subjects, and I was really good at them. Um, so I have that kind of, that God gave me that brain. It's like people would be mad. I got such a good mark, but it's like, I didn't give myself this brain. God gave it to me. Get used to it. So I really got, for the fact that I was alone, right, and after a bad marriage, and then I realized that my opportunities were limited just because I happened to have been born a woman, which was just, that's an injustice. That's wrong. And so I became very outspoken among my circle. And I was determined that I was just going to like push the boundaries wherever I could, whenever I could, to, try to right that.
Yes, I love that. And again, I really wanted to talk about this because it was so recent that women were, not able to have the same jobs as men, and we couldn't have our own credit cards. We couldn't have our own houses. Like right now, I own my own house,
Yeah.
and I could not do that. Right. And
Right.
until what year was it?
It was sometime in the 70s, that later on in the 70s. But yeah, if you
Mhm.
wanted something like that, you had to have a cosigner, like your dad or someone has to be a man had to cosign. It's like you were treated like you were a child.
Wow. Yeah. So I think that's so cool that you were a part of that movement and that you had the confidence to speak out about it and really go after the things that you felt in your heart. And um yeah, I just think that's so cool. And so I guess from there, where let's transition into the story of how you found God, because I know you told me about it was through a coworker, right? You were So tell us that story.
Yeah, so I was working in a factory, um, which whatever, it was what I could get, right? So I was working in this factory, and it was an electronics shop. The department I worked in, and we sat at these benches, and this place was, they had a club that they would do, like when people were retiring or whatever during the summer, they would have banquets, and after hours, of course. And so we would go to these banquets and everybody would party. We would all have such a great time at these parties. And one of the guys in our group, um, his wife was a Christian. And so one day he comes in and he's telling us how he came to know the Lord. And he's like very excited and he's telling everybody about Jesus. And we're all like rolling our eyes, and it's like, okay, here we go. Here we go, Steve. And so Steve
Right.
witnessed,
No one wants to
he
hear
went,
about this. Yeah.
it was crazy. Yeah. So he, we're sitting, I had like a captive audience, right? Because we're sitting at these benches facing each other. He's on the other side, and we're just working all day, right? And he's talking. And so for a whole year, he witnessed to me and my friend Joanne. And he told us he would talk about the Bible and he would pick out Old Testament stories, which we had all learned in Sunday school. And then he would tie them to Jesus and what Jesus did. And so he just kept going through these like all day, every day for a whole year. And it would get to the point when, like in the afternoon, we'd be like, okay, Steve, that's enough for today. I need a break. And he had to go. He went out on. He had surgery. He had some kind of surgery that he had to have, and it was my friend Joanne says to me, "What do you think about all this stuff that Steve has been telling us?" And I had been rolling this sort of stuff around in my head, and he had made a very convincing case. Like if there was a trial, and he had to presented evidence, he would have won, because I said to her, I
Hmm.
said, everything that he's saying about Jesus is right. And I feel like I have no choice but to believe it and accept it. And I'm telling you, I felt I felt him come into my heart. I felt the Holy Spirit come in to
Hmm.
my heart. And that was how I came to know
Wow.
him.
What age were you when that happened?
I was 30,
Okay.
interestingly enough.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's so cool that he and I think it's just an example of I think so many people think ministry is like you have to be a pastor, you have to be some name, but like that's a perfect example of God places you in certain settings. Like he placed this guy in this factory
Yeah.
to just be himself and
Yeah.
just and then that was just overflowing to all of you and now your life is completely changed.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
That that's so amazing. And so you've been open with me too about the relationship struggles that you had um and your past marriages and whatnot. And then now you're with this amazing man. You've been together how many years?
26.
26 years. And you have such a great marriage. And both of you have been an inspiration for me. So can you talk a little bit about that? Like, what have you learned from your past in relationships and kind of like take us back to pre-art is her husband's name. Take us back to pre-art with relationships and like what you learned and then we can talk through the story of how you met Art because this story is really amazing.
Yeah. So, as I already mentioned, with my first marriage, I chose poorly. I had such a low opinion of myself that I went and married a guy who was already physically violent before we actually got married, and I went and had
Wow.
married him anyway because I didn't think that I could get anything better than that. Um, so, that just became impossible to stay with because of I really believed that at some point he would start abusing my son, and that I
Mm.
couldn't. That was what saved me, is that I couldn't have that happen to him.
Wow.
And then I was again still I'm just only like 22 years old, and here I am, a single mom, and doing all this stuff. And then I was um, taken advantage of by someone who was older, and I believed his dumb story, and then realized that after a while, being in that relationship with he was a married man, and I realized that it's just like I guess it kind of went in with the feminist phase where all men are creeps. They're just bad. Why do I need one of these
Mm.
guys or whatever? So that was my wild and crazy 70s. Um, and then I had another like really terrible, short-lived, um, bad choice later on. Um, and then I was married for the third time when I got saved. And he was not at all uh, down with being married to a born again Christian, and so that was the nail in the coffin of that relationship. Um, but it's like I realized that I was terrible at choosing a spouse, and that without God doing something, there's just no way that I could trust myself, right, to do this again. I just can't. I just can't keep doing this. I'm just done. So there was a 6 months worth of revival services at the church that I was going to, and it was during this time that it's like my relationship with the Lord got to the place where it's like, you know what? I don't even care anymore if I ever get married. I don't care. I've got Jesus. He's the only man I need. I don't need it. I don't need any of this other stuff. I'm good. And then I heard a message one night during this revival talking about the power of agreement. And I said, you know what? That I could take. That I can live with. That would be a good thing to have. And so,
what do you mean by the power of agreement?
In prayer, in the Lord, right? Because I had been, the first two marriages were just such a wreck. And then the third one, once I got saved, there is nothing worse than being unequally yoked. Okay. There's absolutely nothing worse than that you love God with all your heart and you love Jesus and you're married to someone who despises the fact that God's first in your life. Wow. That was not a pleasant place to be at all. So I knew for sure that was, that had no place in my future, anything like that ever again, because it was just too painful.
Yeah.
And so I had to trust God that if it was ever going to happen again, he had to do it, because I was just like, I stink at this. Picking a good spouse. And it was all I had really. Was like, for me, by this point, I'm 45 years old. I'm like, okay, I just, I'm over all this other stuff. I don't want to date. I don't want any of that business. But when the ministers talked about that, about agreement, and I like, okay, I want that. And so he prayed over me, and he's saying this like, okay, that right before your very eyes. And I'm thinking, all right, I know all the guys that are here in this church, and I am not interested. No, not interested at all. Mm-hmm. So I'm like thinking to myself, okay, I'm just going to wait. God, you're going to have to show me this, and you're going to have to convince me. Like, it's going to have to all be you. And I didn't tell anybody. I didn't tell any of my friends, none of that stuff. So I was actually the head usher. And so I was go with the guy, the evangelist, when he would minister to people. I would be with him. And we were one of those churches, where we put the modesty cloths on the ladies when they fall out and all this other stuff, So this one day, he would go, after he got done with everybody who came up front for prayer, he would walk down the aisle. So we go down the aisle, and he's in the middle, and he starts praying for people. He lays hands on somebody, and the Lord said to me, I wasn't even paying attention to who it was, because I didn't have to pay attention unless it was a woman that he was praying for. And so he says, the Lord spoke to me and said, he's ministering to your husband. And I looked over, and it was Art. And I'm like, okay, really?
Wow.
I really didn't know him that well, but his sister was married to the assistant pastor there.
Okay.
So, but I like kind of knew who he was, but it's like, he just seemed like he was kind of a goofball, and I was a very serious person. so
nothing's changed.
Yeah. I'm like, okay, all right. And I'm like, inside, I'm like, all right, Lord, you're going to have to confirm this. Okay.
Yeah, you got to show me more here.
Yeah, this is not enough. Right?
Yeah.
And so he said, all right, I'll be showing him the same time I'm showing you. I'm like, okay.
Wow.
And so over the next few days, and this is like the matter of 2 weeks' time, okay, from the time I got prayed for until this is transpiring. And so we were having services like just about every night. There was only like 2 nights, I think, that we were off. And one night after the service, like everything was pretty much done, but the music was playing and people were still hanging around, just soaking in the presence. Um, I sat down, and Art was sitting a couple of rows behind me, and the one of the ushers was sitting on the platform, and he gets this funny look on his face, and he comes over to me and he goes, "Do you know anybody who's getting married soon?" And my heart did a flip. Okay, it did a flip, and I looked at him and I said, "Go away."
Wow.
And so that was like,
Yep.
and then then he Art had gone to like a Benny Hinn meeting, and I said to him, I'm like, okay, you're gonna, I want to hear about this when you come back. And the whole group, there was a bunch of us who would go out to eat after the services are over. Here it's like 10:30 at night. We're going down to the restaurant down the road. And these people are like, oh my gosh, no, look at they're coming in to eat, whatever. But I was started paying attention to him because I was like, all right, who is this? What's he about? And then all
Right.
this other stuff. And so um, he had gone to this meeting, and we come back. He comes back. It's on a Sunday, and he says to me, like, I said, well, yeah, okay, we can go have something to eat. I'm like, all right, yeah, let's go eat. And you can tell me about it. And so he's telling me about it. And then he says, okay, we had services at 6:00, and he's like, all right, let's go for a ride. We'll go for a ride in between before church. And we go to his parents' house, and I'm thinking, okay, we're going to his parents' house. So we sat there for a while and visited. Then we went to church, and then we thought that everybody was going to the same place after the service that night. And we get there, and there's nobody else there but us. And so I asked, he's like, why did you have somebody else putting down the tarps? He's a construction guy. Why did you have somebody else putting the tarps down on the ladies in the front? And I said, well, I'm training people. He goes, well, how come? I said, well, because I'm going to get a promotion. And he said, really? To what? I said, well, I'm going to be ministering with my husband. And he said, well, who might that be? And I said, it's you. And he said, I know.
That is so hilarious. That's my
So
favorite part.
we started sharing, like, what did God show you and when, right? So we started
Yeah.
sharing with each other. And,
Wow.
he goes home and tells his father, Denise and I are getting married. He goes, yeah, no kidding. He goes, I already knew that. He says, well, how did you know that? He said, well, this morning at church, she's up in the front in that dress, and her dress turned into a wedding dress. And I'm like, wedding dress? And the Lord said to him, daughter-in-law. And he goes, daughter-in-law?
Oh
So
my gosh.
we keep, when we're hearing these things, not only did God show
Confirmation.
us, he's showing his dad and, whatever, all these things. And so, like, we stood out there in the parking lot. We're like, okay, we're making our plans right now because we're going to get married because I'm not being disobedient because of you, whatever kind of thing. Um, and so that's how we did it. That was and then
Wow.
3 months from then we were married.
Oh
Just
my
like,
gosh.
crazy,
It's
crazy
it's
kids.
so amazing though how God works when that's why I love your story because you both were at a point where you've made mistakes in the past with marriages, with relationships, and you were like, okay, Lord, I'm done choosing for myself. You need
Yeah,
to choose for me. And
yeah,
God literally spoke to both of you separately.
yes. It's so funny because when Art shared with me how he was thinking, like God speaking to him about ministry and stuff and in the work, and he said, "You're going to need a helpmate." And he looked up and he saw me. I'm the first person he saw, and he was thinking like, "Oh, okay."
Yep.
Because he was thinking of a younger blonde, whatever. And the Lord said to him, it's not about appearance.
Mm-hmm.
It's about my work. And so it's like both of us, we never would have chosen each other on our own, but we know for sure that this was God and this was his plan. And it's what he had, all in mind all along. And the kicker here, Sam, is that we went to the same high school together. We graduated the same year and we never met in high school.
Wow.
We never knew each other.
Oh
Because,
my gosh.
I was from the little town that we had to go there and he was from the city. We never knew each other. And of course, he was in church at the time. So, it wouldn't have worked out anyway because I was probably too wild.
You needed some time to
Yeah.
get that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
we needed those intervening years for us to be actually ready for each other
Yeah.
to commit to one another, and because we both learned it's like you have to. Marriage is a serious commitment that it's like God put us together, and whatever comes up, we have to work through it. We don't have a choice in this
Right.
thing. We don't have a choice.
Yes. Ugh. I love these stories because when you're single, it's so easy to get into, like, I don't know if it's comparison or you just feel the pressure of being a woman and growing older, and like if you want a family or whatever it is, or if you're just single and you feel lonely, like it's so easy to get in the mode of I need to find someone. I need to just be with someone. And I think these stories are so encouraging because, like what you said earlier, you said something like the worst situation to be in is you love the Lord with all your heart and your spouse despises that.
Yeah. It was torture, really was.
Wow. And I think that's such good like learning for all of the listeners and myself. Like we can trust God to pick for us. And I had a friend tell me before that she said this quote that those who let God pick for them, he reserves the best for them. Something along those lines. But when we actually just let him, like, surrender to him and say, Lord, like, I'm done choosing for myself. I want what you want for me. And that's what I've been praying lately. Like, Lord, I just want what you want for me. I don't know what I want at this point. I just want what you want. And this is such a testimony that he will give you what is best for you, and it's about his work. And that's what your husband Art, he's always said to me, because he's been a mentor to me at this point, and just all of you in Connecticut. It's your family at this point. But
Yeah, we love you.
yes, I love all of you so much. But he's always said it's about God's work. Marriage is about God's work. And so can you talk about that a little bit? Like, what have you learned now since being married to him, and it was confirmed and clear that this is your husband? And so now you've been married 25 years, right? Or
26.
26. So yeah, tell us like how that's been in marriage, and how you've kept God first and made it about his work.
Mm. Well, it's interesting because as a Christian woman, the first thing your default setting is to step back and like, okay, have to let the man run the show, right? Let him be everything, do
Mhm.
everything, like be the man, whatever. Um, and that's not it.
Wow. Cuz that's
we,
how it's like we're taught that. And I it's important that we like study and read the word for ourselves, because it's not like in the Bible these women were powerful women of God. But anyway, keep going.
yeah, no, that's right. It's a partnership,
Yes.
right? And the marriage is a partnership, and it's not only like the scripture that says that there's a scripture that says submit to one another
Yeah.
in the Lord. So a husband and wife should be submitting to one another. It shouldn't be anyone lording it over the other. There shouldn't be like anybody trying to be dominant in the relationship, right? Whether it's the man or the woman, nobody should be trying to be dominant. But you're supposed to be working together. And the thing is that, we, with Art and I have strengths where he's lacking, and he has strengths where I'm lacking. And together we make a great partnership. Um, you know, I've been able to speak into his life. He's been able to speak into my life, and we've both grown a lot in our walk with the Lord as we've walked through this marriage in 26 years. And it's not like we didn't have our stuff all together. Okay, so we still had baggage. He had been married a couple times before. I had been married before. We both still had some baggage, right? And
Yeah.
had convinced myself that I had dealt with all my junk, but that was only because I was single.
Right. We think we got it all figured out. And then,
Yeah. Once we were actually married, I realized very quickly,
oh,
oh, that's still there. Oh, okay. I got to do something
yeah.
about that.
That's what I'm nervous about. I think I got it all figured out now. Just wait till God puts a man in my life. I'm going to be like,
like, oops, that again. Okay, I got to deal with this now.
Right.
But yeah, so that's kind of, but just the willingness is you got to be willing to work through stuff. And nobody, there's no relationship that doesn't have bumps. There's no relationship that doesn't have disagreements in arguments even. But it's like you can't hold grudges, right? My mother even says, I love about you and Art says that you can be mad and you yell about something, but then later, a few minutes later, you forget it. You don't bring it up again. It's like we neither one of us wants to live in that kind of a thing, right? Where you're always rehashing the thing that happened last week, and we both have our different, we're different in the Lord. I mean, my husband is he's a seer, and he's prophetic, and he's just like some of this crazy stuff, and he kind of thinks that
Very
everybody, well,
spiritual
doesn't
dude.
everybody see that? Like, no, babe, no, we don't
Art
all
is
see that.
Art is the guy that is driving and has his eyes closed and
And I have photographic evidence where he's on Interstate 95. We're going to Providence, and we had Jesus culture on. It was a bad mistake. Because he starts
Yep.
worshiping the Lord, and then forget it. He's like not really there. He's there, but he's not there. He's somewhere else at the same time. And I took a picture of him with his eyes closed while he was driving on the interstate in the
That's
passing lane,
hilarious.
no less. I'm like, okay. And then I told him, okay, that's it. I shut the music off. You are shut off. But I
He's
am
cut off.
not. Yeah. I'm not that person, right? I don't. I have to. I'm more of like the studier person, when I, reading the scriptures. And I go, a lot of stuff is what I used to call intuition, which is discernment and knowledge, that I just like know stuff, and I don't have no idea how I know it, but I just know it. And then I find it in the Bible. I'm like, oh, okay. All right. That's why I know it. Somehow God showed me.
Yep.
But so we've a lot of times, and most of our ministering has been like with one-on-one individually with people. Like over the years, we've had ministry we've done with couples, or like one person with the two of them. They would have an issue, and we would help them through it. Just really, I mean, the thing you do is point to people to God and what the scriptures say about things, but just talking people through things, and so that they can come to a resolution, and do things in a scriptural way. So there's been a lot of that, and then we minister. We go to a prison, do prison ministry together. Art does more of that than I do, but I do go with him for that. but a lot of it is like somebody once said, prayed over us and said that we were like um, Priscilla and Aquila from the book of Acts. Like, well, I'm like, whoa. So I had to go like look them up again to make sure I knew. So, we're a good team. We really are a good team. Like I said, he has strong points where I'm weak, and I have strengths where he's weak, and it works out great.
Yes, that's awesome. And you two are amazing. And I just love how down to earth you are. Like you said, it's how you minister like to one person at a time. And like God has each one of us and each marriage on like a certain path and a certain call. And I think the most important thing is just, and your husband, Art, says this all the time, it's just being where you are and becoming more like Jesus. And through that, like through your personal life and just being where you're at your home, your church community, your work, you're just now reflecting God, and that is like transforming lives around you. I think that's what I've learned most from you, Art, and all the people in Connecticut.
Yeah, God made us each one of us unique, and
Mhm.
He didn't intend for us to be like carbon copies of one another. We're supposed to
Yeah.
grow to be more Christ-like and to look more like Jesus. He's the only one that we should be, trying to pattern ourselves after. And
Yes.
the easy part is the more time you spend with him, the more you look like him and act like him.
Yep. Yeah, and it's you're not even striving for it. You just start changing, and even your desires, your heart, it's like, "Oh, why do I feel compassion towards this person? I didn't before." But it's because it's your heart is changing. And one thing I do want to say as we start wrapping up is you mentioned when I talked to you the other day, the woman at the well, and how you really identify with her. Can you share a little bit about that and about
Yeah.
that story in case people don't know the story?
Yes. So after I got saved, I was married. I was on my third marriage. Um, but when I read the scriptures, I had tried to read the Bible before I got saved, and it doesn't really work out very well. You kind of get stuck and you stop, and you're like, okay, this is too hard. When
Mhm.
I came on that story, um, Jesus was thirsty, and he went to a well, and there was a Samaritan woman there, and he asked her for a drink. And now it was not the normal time. You learn all this stuff later on, right? That was not the normal time for people to be getting water at the well. But because she was kind of like, probably was talked about by a lot of people in the town, and she said, what are you asking me? You're asking me for water, and it's like she was shocked that number one that he was Jew, and he spoke to her, and that you know like here you are, right? You're talking to me and you're asking me for something. And he told her who he was, and she's like, well, thinking like, okay, well, yeah, but you know is he's really like he's if he knew who I was, why would he be talking to me? And he says to her, go call your husband. And she says, I don't have a husband. And he said to her, yes, you're right. And that you've had five and the one you're with is now not your husband. And when he said that to her, but he was like still reaching out to her and telling her that he has the like living water that he was willing to give her, and that he shouldn't have been culturally, he should not have been talking to her, but he was. And he was accepting of her, and he didn't turn her away or treat her like dirt. He was like, I want a drink of water, but I can offer you like water that so that you will never thirst again. He was offering her the living water. And I identified with her because of my past, because not only just 3 marriages, but how I was wild in the 70s. Okay. In between the first two, I was wild. I took the whole um, women's lib movement and of, like really like how a lot of them have, like they hate men. I was down that road and I was going to use men the way they used me. And so I was a mess. And when I first got saved, I was like, how could God accept me with all this stuff I've done and all the people I've been with and all the evil that I commit? How? But the fact that he did, and he reached out and he already knew before I did all those things that I was going to do them, and he was still going to call me anyway. He was still going to
Wow.
send this guy to where I worked to
Yep.
to go after me for a whole year when we were the only two left that would talk to him, and he was like, "But God, they're the only ones who will talk to me. I don't have any other friends." And he's like, "I want them. You need to talk to them." But that he went to all that trouble for me, and they accepted me with all the stuff that I had done. I was like, how could you
Amen.
not love someone with every part of your soul because he accepted you
Right.
just like that, with all of your mess, with all of your junk? And I really identified with her, um,
Mm-hmm.
and just so much gratitude to the Lord for taking me and erasing my past, or just wiping the slate clean so that I could be new, and so that he could bring me to wholeness is just remarkable.
I so resonate with that because when I first came to Christ, I didn't even really talk to anyone about it. Like my family and friends didn't even know that I was like on this journey with God, but I just felt so accepted by Jesus. And I started reading the scriptures, and so often people just take what everyone else says and don't read the Bible for themselves, so they don't really understand the true love of God. But
Yeah,
when I started reading the word myself, when I first found God and everything, I was like, oh my gosh, like I identify so much with these people, and God loves me just the way I am, and he accepts me, and he's a safe place for me, even with all my junk and all the things I've done and my shame and whatever. Like I felt like he was a safe place for me. So when
yeah,
I hear a lot of people that have that perspective of God, that like he is shunning them and he is this, mean, judgy guy. And I understand that's a probably like a upbringing thing, or you're in a church that has like bad teaching, or you're not really understanding for yourself. But I've never really identified with that, because for me, I was like, oh my gosh, like I have this one person, Father God, Jesus, Holy Spirit, like I have this person I can talk to, and he fully accepts everything about me, my
yeah,
past, he knows everything about me, and like
yeah,
I am accepted and loved unconditionally.
yeah, yeah. It's and it's so true. Like you said, you have to read the Bible for yourself. I was
Mhm.
so hungry. The first year I was saved, I read through the Bible 3 times.
There's nothing like a life with Christ. I mean, my life is completely changed. You're a living testimony to that. And well, I just want to thank you for being here. It was such an amazing conversation. I know this will be so encouraging to anyone that listens. And is there anything that you feel led to share that you haven't shared yet that you want to leave listeners with?
I think just trust the journey, and don't forget to smell the flowers on along the way, right? It's not about the destination of a certain thing, right? And I know that sometimes we can get caught up in that, but enjoy where you are now, and keep your relationship with the Lord as the main thing, and all the stuff is going to work out.
Amen. I received that. That was encouraging for me. So thank you, Denise. It was just awesome. And I'm excited to listen back to the episode. And I know we will talk soon.
Great. Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. It was great.
All right, guys, we'll see you next time. Bye. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. I just loved soaking up all the wisdom and the encouragement from Denise. And it's just a testimony of God's goodness. Her whole life is a testimony of God's goodness. And I just love it. And before we go, if you don't already, I just want to make sure that you follow me on Instagram and TikTok at Hey, it's Samantha Marie, if you don't already. And if you enjoyed this episode, please rate the show, write a review on Apple or Spotify. That would mean so much to me. That's how we grow. That's how we reach more people. And we're also on YouTube. You can watch every single episode there. My links are below. And make sure to share with a friend or a family member that you know this show would encourage as well. All right, guys, I will see you next time.